My name is Paul Vallone, and I would like to welcome you to the first edition of Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where our intention each Sunday is to equip you with the ammunition you need to defend your rights against the liberal onslaught. A little about me. Since 1994, I have directed Grassroots North Carolina, the state's most effective gun rights organization. In 1995, as our first legislative project, we passed a concealed handgun law for North Carolina. Since then, we have been involved in drafting and passing any number of bills, including concealed handgun reciprocity, statewide firearms preemption, the purchase permit bypass, Castle Doctrine, Stand Your Ground, expansion of concealed carry into parks, restaurants, educational properties, and elsewhere. We have also had the distinction of making sure that no significant gun control has passed on our watch. Now, today we are broadcasting from the Civitas Conservative Leadership Conference in Raleigh, a wonderful event hosted by the Civitas Institute, which brings together conservative leaders not only from around the state, but around the world. For the first edition of Guns, Politics, and Freedom, I would like to talk a little bit about what happened the other day in Alexandria, Virginia, from a gun rights perspective, and how it might or might not impact your right to keep and bear arms. Then we'll talk with North Carolina House Representative Chris Millis, who is one of the architects behind House Bill 746, a bill moving through the General Assembly which stands to revolutionize carrying firearms for personal protection. Now, Charles Dickens once wrote, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. November was the best of times." You won a great victory for gun rights in electing Donald Trump, and especially in defeating Hillary Clinton. But did you really win? My good friend Tim Daughtry, who writes for Town Hall and authored Waking the Sleeping Giant, How Mainstream Americans Can Beat Liberals at Their Own Game, argues that one of the problems of conservatives is that when we win, we go home. After all, we don't want to control others. We just want to be left alone, to go back to our family, our jobs, our lives. We're willing to let the people we elected take care of the rest. In 23 years running gun rights organizations, I see this all the time. After Sandy Hook, when federal gun control was on the table, we couldn't sign up members fast enough. When we win, however, like in November, people forget we exist. Meanwhile, unfortunately, the left doesn't go home. Win or lose, leftists continue their generations-long march toward their communist utopia. When they lose to mainstream America in the political arena, they fall back on their ironclad control of the media, the courts, cultural institutions, and, of course, the schools. The leftists won't give up without a fight, and that, of course, is why we are seeing the continuing entrenchment against Donald Trump. In a brilliant speech to the Conservative Leadership Conference last night, Nigel Farage, the engineer of Brexit, likened American leftists to Japanese soldiers on tropical islands who emerged from their bunkers years after the war had ended to contest its result. Given the bitter hate that consumes the left since November, what happened in Alexandria was inevitable. James Hodgkinson had a long history of hating Republicans. Be it dozens of letters to the editor, Facebook posts, or whatever it was, Hodgkinson was an angry, bitter, and hateful leftist. Unfortunately, he was typical of the breed. And that means, unfortunately, what happened in Alexandria will likely happen again. The response to James Hodgkinson deliberately shooting Republican lawmakers from both Democrats and Republicans would be hilarious if it weren't so tragic. Predictably, the left and its gun control zealots blame guns. I've already gotten emails from Michael Bloomberg's AstroTurf organization calling itself Moms Demand Action, and from Gabby Giffords and her Americans for Responsible Solutions in its front to claim they're not really anti-gun. As usual, dancing in the blood of victims to pursue the preordained disarmament agenda is their forte, and they're not wasting any time. And of course, ignoring this deplorable event, they conveniently avoided mentioning, that this was a product of one of their own people. Now, in an act of the theater from the absurd, Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe immediately jumped in front of the cameras to admonish us that 93 million people per day were being killed by guns. I'm glad I drew up my will, since by that reckoning I think I only have 3 days to live. But even the right, if you'll forgive the pun, is off base. We've heard that the political temperature is too high, that political discourse needs to come down a notch, that our country isn't working. What a crock. Whether it's supposed comedy depicting the beheading of Donald Trump, or people being silenced, harassed, or even beaten for wearing Trump clothing, or conservatives canceling speaking engagements on college campuses for fear of their safety, all of this is coming from one side, one perspective, one group of people. The American left has come unhinged. Blame it on feelings of entitlement, maybe mental illness, or being raised as adult infants. Blame whatever you like. But the fact is, the left doesn't plan to let you return this country to traditional American values, and they are willing to use violence to win. So the bottom line is that this time, unlike past victories, you can't go home. In general, you're going to have to fight back. Not with violence, but with votes, money, and sweat. In particular, here in North Carolina, we have a task for you. Despite this toxic political environment, that task is to help us pass House Bill 746, which has so far made it through the North Carolina House and now resides in the Senate. It made it through the North Carolina House, but it didn't quite have a unanimous vote of support by conservatives or by Republicans, so we're going to need to work on that. Now, I should note that the time for this bill is short, and we anticipate a veto by our fine governor. Chances are the legislature is only going to be in session until perhaps early July, no later than that. So we need to work fast. Now, House Bill 746 would, among other things, relieve you of the burden of having to get a governmental permission to carry firearms for self-protection. It is an important step toward true constitutional carry. HB 746 is, in fact, the next step in the evolution of personal protection legislation. The bill duplicates successful policy or policy successfully implemented in no less than 13 other states. It's currently the law in Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Idaho, Kansas, Maine, Mississippi, Missouri, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Vermont, West Virginia, and Wyoming. And we should note that those 13 states have reported no negative experiences. Once again, the naysayers on the left will predict dire things. They'll predict Wild West shootouts at traffic lights, as they have in the past. They will predict blood in the streets. They have done that each time we have expanded concealed carry, and each time they have been wrong. Now, understand that if someone is prohibited from getting a concealed carry permit due to, say, previous convictions or DUIs or something in their history, they would still be prohibited from carrying concealed without a permit. Nothing about that will change. Now, Section 11 of the bill, Section 1 of the bill, eliminates the need for concealed handgun permits under limited and controlled circumstances. It does not break new ground. Now, more on that in a moment. with Representative Chris Millis after we take a short break. Welcome back to Guns, Politics, and Freedom. I'm your host, Paul Vallone, and I am broadcasting today from the Civitas Conservative Leadership Conference, where conservative leaders from around the world are meeting and helping you defend your rights. Now, with us today is North Carolina Representative Chris Millis of Pender and Onslow County, I believe, to discuss House Bill 746, a bill which represents the next step in the evolution of laws enabling you to carry firearms to better protect yourself and your family. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Yes, sir, Paul. Glad to be on.
Now, Representative Millis, you are one of 5 sponsors, primary sponsors on this bill. Who else is among the Patriots?
Yes, so we have Representative Michael Speciale from Craven County, Representative Larry Pittman from Cabarrus, Representative Justin Burr from Alamance, and also we have a number of other individuals who may not be primary sponsors on the final bill, but have been instrumental in helping move this forward, and that's also Representative Jay Adams, just to name a few. But there have been a lot of individuals throughout the House Republican caucus that have assisted us in moving this bill forward. It has been a long, arduous process, but we're very pleased with the end result and looking forward to seeing this bill pass into law shortly, as it's traversed the House and it's now sitting in the Senate waiting on action.
Excellent. And we thank you and all the other sponsors for your work. You guys are patriots. Now, before we get into the details on the bill, let's talk about a little background. What made you decide to sponsor this bill? I mean, it clearly means a lot to you. You've put a lot of effort into the bill.
Yeah, so like the other bill sponsors, I most certainly share a major viewpoint of limited government. And when it comes to the Second Amendment, for individuals to have greater opportunities to be able to protect themselves and their loved ones. So whenever I traverse the issue of what is more conventionally called constitutional carry, and I saw the imbalance that is within a North Carolina law right now, where criminals have a major advantage over law-abiding citizens when it comes to the ability of those law-abiding citizens to be able to defend themselves and their loved ones. So of seeing that imbalance, I really became passionate about the issue alongside of Representative Larry Pittman and Michael Speciale and the others that we have named to see that these measures make its way forward and advance in law. The bill that we have that's already passed the House, House Bill 746, is a major step towards what is more traditionally viewed as constitutional carry. I wouldn't say it's fully there, but it's a lot closer than what existing law is. And so I'm very passionate about the issue after seeing the imparity and the imbalance between criminals and law-abiding citizens.
Thank you. Yeah, and I love the openness that you have expressed in exactly what the bill does, what the bill doesn't do, its strengths and its shortcomings. Because I mean, there are only certain things that are achievable in the current political environment. I mean, it's just a reality of the situation. And I know you've expended a considerable amount of effort herding cats, in caucus to try and make sure that you could get enough support to pass this bill and that we can override what will almost certainly be a gubernatorial veto.
Correct.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what HB 746 does and especially, of course, what it does not do?
Yeah, so the final version of it, as you know, it has changed a lot since it was originally introduced. House Bill 746, as originally filed, was called North Carolina Constitutional Carry. It has continued to alter throughout the process of running through the caucus. Bill sponsors have worked tremendously hard on it, along with those who were part of our work group, as we try to respectfully and responsibly address the concerns of members of our Republican caucus, which we've been able to achieve. So what the bill does do as the final draft is that it allows individuals who are currently allowed to open carry a firearm to be able to conceal that firearm without having to traverse a government-mandated permit only in areas where they can currently open carry. So I know that it's a lot of words to say something simple as, individuals will be able to carry a firearm concealed without a permit in places where they can currently open carry that firearm. So that's the major provision of House Bill 746. There's there's a number of other provisions in the bill as well, as we've outlined in the past. Anything from Representative Jay Adams brought forth a provision to have a prepackaged firearm safety course from the State Board of Education. That way that local schools or local public schools can pick that prepackaged firearm safety course up and be able to teach that within our public schools here in North Carolina. That's a major provision in there. We also clean up a number of firearm-related statutes when we're talking about traversing what is considered educational property through a public thoroughfare. We also clarify the definition of whenever individuals part of a field trip with a school may go off into an area where that's considered extracurricular when it comes to those measures as well. We also clarify in common law. We codify what is already in common law when we're dealing with going to the terror of the public. That's another provision in the bill. So there's a number of provisions in the bill. That's the reason why it's changed from its name of North Carolina Constitutional Carry to now Omnibus Firearms Related Statutes. Yep. That's a short version of a very long bill.
Excellent. We'll talk about those other measures perhaps more in detail a little bit later. Right now, you've said that this bill essentially, and by the way, this approach is brilliant to establish a standard where you can carry concealed now any place that you can carry openly. And there are very good reasons for that, especially when it comes to the argument about training and some of the other arguments that the naysayers are putting forth. But let me talk a little bit about what it does not do. For example, WRAL and some of the other media outlets are screaming bloody murder that now people are going to be able to buy guns without background checks. And there is a lot of misinformation being propagated about this bill in the media throughout the state because, of course, the leftists are frothing at the mouth about it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that particular item and what the bill does not do?
Yeah, so that particular item that you brought up is completely false. There is nothing in regard to firearm purchases, whether long guns or handguns, as a part of House Bill 746. So it's just complete fake news by WRAL.
So you're saying it does not impact gun purchases in the slightest?
Not at all.
Same background checks that are done now are going to be done in the future. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
And what else does the bill not do?
Well, it's also been purported that the bill lowers the age of which an individual can carry a firearm. That is not true. It is existing law in North Carolina that if you're 18 years old, that you can open carry a firearm. We provided parity between open carry and concealed carry, but the age is still the same, and that is 18. Nothing's been lowered. Now, in regard to individuals who may want to receive a full-fledged concealed handgun permit, which authorizes you to carry more practically in more places than where you can currently open carry, those individuals still have to be 21 to be able to receive that permit. Nothing has changed in regard to that. So a lot of twisting the truth or purporting half-truths in regard to the 18 to 21 debate as well.
As you say, fake news. Unfortunately, that seems to be the order of the day lately. So essentially, permitless carry is not really breaking new ground. Would that be right? As I think I mentioned, it's now law in 13 states.
That's exactly right. 13 other states have already pushed forward measures of such as this in some way, shape, or form. Some more expansive than others. If we were able to pass 746, it is going to be narrowly tailored for individuals to be able to carry concealed without a permit only in places where they can currently open carry. Some states are more expansive than that, but we feel this is a good step forward right now, and it was really the most substantial piece that we could get through both the House and hopefully eventually through the Senate and signed into law as well. So no, this is not new ground by any means, and of course, as you articulated earlier, there's been no negative results from other states, and there's also hasn't been a drop in those who go after a full-fledged concealed handgun permit permit for purposes of reciprocity or for expanded carry. And I also would say as well that for individuals who are out there who are worried about safety and training, is that that is necessary regardless of how you carry and whether you're carrying a handgun or long gun. Those matters are still important. Is to being able to protect yourself while you're traversing a government permit process.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. As a matter of fact, I think we all agree that that safety and training will be done. It will be on a volunteer basis, and those mechanisms will be in place. But as you know, we are not breaking new ground. All right, in just a moment, we are going to take a short break, and we will return with Representative Chris Millis discussing House Bill 746 and the many things that it's going to be doing for gun owners. In the meantime, we would absolutely love it if you would check out our website at grnc.org, grnc.org, and check out legislative alerts, which will help you defend your rights and actually know who to contact to make sure that this bill moves along in a timely fashion. And then in a moment, as I say, we'll be back to the Conservative Leadership Conference, this hosted by the Civitas Institute, and we will continue discussing House Bill 746 with Representative Chris Millis.
Gun, those matters are still important. Is to being able to protect yourself while you're traversing a government permit process.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. As a matter of fact, I think we all agree that that safety and training will be done. It will be on a volunteer basis, and those mechanisms will be in place. But as you know, we are not breaking new ground. All right, in just a moment, we are going to take a short break, and we will return with Representative Chris Millis discussing House Bill 746 and the many things that it's going to be doing for gun owners. In the meantime, we would absolutely love it if you would check out our website at grnc.org, grnc.org, and check out legislative alerts, which will help you defend your rights and actually know who to contact to make sure that this bill moves along in a timely fashion. And then in a moment, as I say, we'll be back to the Conservative Leadership Conference, this hosted by the Civitas Institute, and we will continue discussing House Bill 746 with Representative Chris Millis. And we will continue discussing House Bill 746 with Representative Chris Millis. Welcome back to the very first edition of Guns, Politics, and Freedom. I am your host, Paul Vallone, and we are broadcasting from the Civitas Conservative Leadership Conference in Raleigh, where conservative leaders from around the world are working together to defend your freedom. With us today is Representative Chris Millis to discuss House Bill 746, the closest thing to full-on constitutional carry bill that has ever advanced through the North Carolina legislature. Now, Representative Millis, we were talking about the bill. You began to discuss some of the other things that it does behind establishing something close to constitutional carry. Now, I do know that I get reports in my capacity with Grassroots North Carolina. I get reports almost daily of people denied concealed handgun permits for impermissible reasons, for people denied or delayed permits for as much as a year, despite the fact that the permit process is only supposed to take 45 days. Now, it's important to note that this concealed handgun permit law we have is a shall-issue law. The sheriff does not have any discretion. He can't decide you don't need a permit, unlike a pistol purchase permit, which is a leftover Jim Crow law, of course. The pistol purchase permit law dates from 1919, a year after it was passed in Missouri, 1918, which was a year after race riots in St. Louis. And so the purchase permit law allows the sheriff considerable latitude in deciding you're not of, and I quote, good moral character, whatever that means, to deny you a permit. The concealed handgun law, however, which was crafted in 1995, does not give him any discretion whatsoever. If you meet the requirements, he must issue you a permit. Yet that's not really what's happening, is it?
No, it's not. The shot clock surrounding the concealed handgun permit process by some local governments and by some sheriffs is being exploited, where the shot clock is not even beginning because of just, I can just say for better sense of the words, not pushing, or I guess having an agenda against individuals being able to safely and practically carry a firearm concealed.
They're dragging their heels, basically.
Exactly. And so what this bill does through a number of provisions in House Bill 746 is that it creates a definite process consistent with what is already now existing law, that it requires the sheriff to set up an appointment within 10 business days to begin to process the application, which when the application is processed, it also requires there to be the request for mental health records and that mental health check, which is a very important piece of legislation.
And that is, and by the way, the requirement on the appointments is crucial. I used to live in Mecklenburg County, and I called to renew a permit at one point, and actually because my permit had lapsed, they had not sent me a renewal notice. So I called them up to apply for a new permit, and they were like, "No, we won't even schedule the appointment until you take the course and you get the certificate, and then you can call us up. And by the way, we're running appointments in June." I think this was in January at that point in time. And it's worse now. I'm told that I've had people report that it takes up to a year to get an appointment to even apply for a concealed handgun permit.
Yeah, and the major problem with that, and the reason why that we're pushing for not only permitless carry in some regard, but also to refining the concealed handgun permit process in this manner, is that for you to be able to practically carry that firearm, you would be a lawbreaker for not having that firearm open to plain sight, which is not something that law-abiding citizens want to be doing. Is breaking the law. So it's important for these measures to be put forward. So it is 10 business days for the appointment to begin the application process. There's a requirement to request the mental health records, but more importantly in the bill, within 45 days, we require there to be a follow-up if mental health records have not been received by 45 days, to make sure that if nothing has fallen through the cracks, and just the odds of 2 requests going out and it being ignored is very slim. So this is a good measure to protect individuals, involved in receiving a concealed handgun permit process. And so that's another provision in the bill that helps that as well. And then after 90 days, they shall issue if you don't meet the qualifications.
Yeah, so basically, whether they get those records back or if they drag their feet, they're still obligated to issue the permit in 90 days regardless.
That's correct, which is a major step forward from the way it currently is, where the shot clock never starts.
Well, frankly, that's what it was originally. It was originally a 90-day issuance period, but somewhere along the line they made a change to 45 days and receipt of mental health records, which began stretching it out to months and months and months. And so, yeah, that's a wonderful thing. Now, one other thing that I actually had a person close to me denied a concealed handgun permit initially because he had actually suffered an injury in Iraq. Okay, and we see people. There's a very vague, very old phrase on people not having any physical or mental infirmity that prevents the safe handling of a handgun, which is being interpreted by sheriffs who are not physicians, who have no idea what that means. And, of course, they're interpreting it to exclude a lot of people who should be allowed to have concealed handgun permits. What does this do to address that?
So we keep the intent of the original law that really wants to not allow individuals who have ongoing and truly diagnosable mental health issues to receive concealed handgun permits. So what we do in the bill, we narrowly tailor this to what the medical profession recognizes as mental disorders, and to not allow it to be vaguely interpreted by a sheriff out of context.
So let me ask you a question. If I have an eating disorder, does this disqualify me?
Right now, from existing law, things of that nature could be a disqualifier in the eyes of the sheriff. But after this bill,
under this bill, it says it must be reasonably expected that this would prevent somebody from safely handling a handgun or be a danger to self or others, I think.
That's correct. So we tether the mental disorders directly to the professional documents. I can't recall exactly what the medical document is regarding psychological disorders, but it's no longer out for interpretation. It has to be something directly tethered to the medical profession.
So essentially it has to be an ongoing mental disorder that a reasonable person would expect would make this person a danger to self or others, and that's the only thing that would exclude you under that provision from getting a concealed handgun permit. Yeah, that's a big step forward. Once again, I get complaints on that daily from people who are improperly denied permits, and their only recourse is to hire an attorney at typically $500 or more to try and free up that permit. A lot of people can't afford that. A lot of people can't afford to undergo the course and the permit fee and the fingerprints and everything else to get a concealed handgun permit. So this bill essentially will allow people of lesser means to now protect themselves.
That's correct. That's correct. And again, not only does it do all that, it also it's one of these measures where right now, as shared earlier, criminals do have a major advantage, not only with the matters that you articulated, but also just traversing the process in general. So now these individuals will be able to protect themselves within the areas where they can currently open carry a firearm and to be able to carry that firearm in a more practical manner. So it's a very, very good move moving forward. And I also say that one provision that we lost throughout the process, which I think would be very important for the listeners moving forward in future legislation, has to do with the prohibition from individuals who are discharged from the military in other than honorable conditions that they can't receive a concealed handgun permit or carry concealed. That was a measure that we had originally within House Bill 746 that throughout the process we lost, but I believe that as more individuals come forth with their testimonies about how this is being improperly applied, and as those testimonies start to reach the ear of the legislators, that I believe that's a provision we'll be able to made right moving forward. I wish it could be done in this bill, but that was a provision we lost.
It is unfortunate because I've gotten a bunch of complaints from people. Typical complaint, when 20 years ago, when my wife left me, I thought I could try and win her back, so I went temporarily AWOL, and now they gave me a general discharge or something that was not a crime in any way, shape, or form, and suddenly the sheriff says he can't have a concealed handgun permit because he has an other than honorable discharge. Yeah. It is kind of unfortunate. And last but not least, educational property. I think it deals with educational property and more narrowly tailors it, since as I understand it, if I were to drive down Hillsborough Street in Raleigh right now with a firearm in my car, I might be a felon. How does that work?
That's correct. In the bill, so we clarify the fact that if you are traversing educational property throughout a publicly maintained and owned thoroughfare, that we use similar language that is already into existing law, that if you remain in your vehicle locked up moving forward, and the only need to get in and out of your vehicle would be to, or the only need to actually stop the car would be to get in and out of your vehicle, and that firearm remains locked up, that you no longer would be a lawbreaker as you traversed Hillsborough Street within that public right-of-way.
Mm-hmm. All righty. Now, we're going to wrap this up for take a short break here, and we'll be back with Representative Chris Millis. And in the meantime, we would love you to check out grnc.org. That'll give you an idea where the bill stands and who you can contact to help make this happen. Again, it's grnc.org, and check it for legislative alerts. We will be back shortly. Welcome back to Guns, Politics, and Freedom. I am your host, Paul Vallone, and we are broadcasting from the Civitas Conservative Leadership Conference in Raleigh, where conservative leaders from around the world are working together to defend your freedom. We are talking with Representative Chris Millis, who is the sponsor of House Bill 746, Omnibus Gun Changes, which, among other things, establishes permitless concealed carry and cleans up our concealed handgun permit system, leaving it intact so that you can still get a permit and have reciprocal rights with other states, since we have many people who travel. And we have reciprocity, I believe, at this point with 37 states, if I'm not mistaken, including all the states around North Carolina, such as Tennessee, South Carolina, and Virginia and elsewhere. So it does maintain the concealed handgun permit system intact, and as we've been saying, it cleans up the issuance of concealed handgun permits by essentially not allowing sheriffs to drag their heels and obstruct the issuing process as they are now in certain urban counties around the state. Now, as we've mentioned, one of the other things that it does is to narrow the definition of educational property so that if you happen to drive through a public thoroughfare that transects an educational property like a college campus, you would not be guilty of a Class I felony, which you currently would be. Now, Representative Millis, my understanding is that it changes the definition of educational properties in other ways, specifically churches. How does that work exactly?
Yeah, so that was a provision that was within a House bill offered by Representative Rena Turner of Iredell County, and what it allows is for if you are a church facility that is allowing a school to utilize the property, or you have some type of an agreement with a school of any sort, public or private, that it clearly defines the ability for you to be able to carry on that property whenever the educational aspects of instruction are not happening. So it doesn't change anything about the fact whenever children are on campus involving educational properties, but whenever they're off campus, it cleans up the law so that you can carry and defend yourself on church properties that are doubly utilized as educational facilities as well.
So if I'm attending a Sunday church service, even though the school has, say, a pre-kindergarten or a day school during the week, providing that's not in session, I'm legal to carry concealed in the church on that weekend.
That's correct. Without this change, you would be a lawbreaker, and the need for individuals to be able to protect themselves, even the place of worship, is there, and so this provision cleans that up for the benefit of those citizens.
And by the way, I have been told by an elder in a church that he called the Attorney General's office, and they cheerfully threatened to prosecute him, on precisely that provision.
Yeah.
So those who think that it isn't being applied, please be very careful, because it may very well be applied.
Correct.
And so educational property is something that this bill cleans up. And we've already mentioned that it covers some measure of education for children in schools. And it also, as you mentioned earlier, covers going armed to the terror of the people. Now, as I recall, that is an ancient common law charge stretching back more than 200 years that actually has no statutory definition. In fact, it depends on variable court decisions over those 2 centuries. And what it means essentially is that you cannot go abroad with the intention of creating an affray, as they put it. Yet the court decisions, the Supreme Court has determined that does not apply if you are merely carrying a firearm, that you must be brandishing it or in some way threatening people, but that too is not what's happening. And I seem to recall a case recently where a soldier took his AR-15 in for a photo shoot and ended up in jail on going armed to the terror of the people. So what exactly does this do to solve that problem?
Yeah, so you laid out very clearly the problem, and so what this does is take the common law provision and to codify it into statute, hoping that it would not be continually misinterpreted, that just because that you are carrying a firearm, that you're not doing so in a manner that is attempting to terrorize the public, that it has to do more than just the carrying of that firearm. So again, it's not new ground, as you stated earlier about plowing new ground. This is only codifying into statute, into state law, what has been the common law for decades upon decades.
All right. Now, this bill has made it through the North Carolina House. It's now sitting in the Senate, and there's a group of senators that are working on this bill right now. And we are going to encourage people to call their North Carolina state senator to make sure this bill moves. What do you envision is going to happen with this bill? What needs to happen with this bill?
Yeah, so what needs to happen with this bill is that now that it's traversed the House with a very strong Republican caucus vote, a vote that I believe that will transcend a governor's veto.
That's an important point, because it didn't get enough votes in the House to actually override a veto. So how's that going to change exactly?
So again, not only is there the aspects of some individuals who are absent, but you also have the aspect of it is a different vote for the bill versus voting to override or sustain a governor's veto. I believe that we most certainly have the ability to override the governor's veto as the bill is currently drafted, but if the Senate sees fit to alter any provisions, then that could continue to strengthen our ability in our factor of safety to achieve that. But there is a major difference between the vote on the bill versus the vote to override. And so what needs to happen is that as session is winding down very quickly, if the Senate will continue their good work on the bill and move it through hopefully next week. That way that we can bring it back for a concurrence vote in the House if need be, and send it to the governor's desk as soon as possible before the session ends. That way that the citizens of the state can benefit from this bill becoming law.
Okay, and I think, as you mentioned, it's very important we do it this year, since from what I have discovered, legislators are loath to move legislation during election years. And invariably what I've been told in the past is, oh, we can't do it this year. This is an election year. We have to do it next year, which, of course, would force us to start all over again from ground zero, trying to get it through the House with a new set of legislators and essentially defeat all of our efforts to date.
That's correct. The next week or possibly 2 weeks is critical. If it doesn't happen within that window, it more likely won't happen for another couple years.
All right. We've been speaking to Representative Chris Millis from the Civitas Conservative Leadership Conference in Raleigh. Thank you very much, Chris, for joining us and for bringing us up to speed on House Bill 746.
It's my honor, Paul. Thank you so much.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the dynamics of what may happen from here. The fact is that we have a certain problem in the General Assembly, like elsewhere, namely that when legislators establish a supermajority and draw themselves districts and become more comfortable where they are, suddenly they stop wanting to do things. The fact is, once a legislator gains power, what they want to do most is to preserve power. The best way to preserve power is not to tick people off. The best way not to tick people off is not to do anything. And consequently, I would have to say, in my 23 years of legislative activity, this is the first time that we've had a bill we managed to keep alive after the crossover deadline, which actually passed weeks ago, and through which the bill was supposed to pass one chamber or the other, or it was dead. Now, thanks to Representative Millis and some of his maneuvering, he kept the bill alive, and we're now able to consider it. But the fact is that these politicians are now way too comfortable in office and are very interested in doing as little as possible. So, frankly, we're going to have to work hard to get this bill passed in the next few weeks. Otherwise, as I say, although it remains alive next year, the reality is that they're not going to want to do anything about it next year. So what we really want you to do is we really want you to go to our website at grnc.org, and we have some phone calls and emails for you to make. Specifically, we have a copy and paste email we want you to send to all Republicans in the North Carolina Senate to get them to support the bill. We want you to call five senators, okay? Senators Tamara Berenger, Danny Britt, Ron Rabin, Norman Sanderson, and Tommy Tucker. Not to say that these people are opposed to the bill, but they have concerns over it, so we need you to express to them your desire to pass this bill in a timely fashion. Again, that's at grnc.org. In closing, I would like to thank the Civitas Conservative Leadership Conference for allowing us to broadcast here. My name is Paul Vallone. You've been listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom. We will be on again next week, and we will bring you up to speed. I hope to be able to tell you at that point that Representative Millis's bill is moving toward the governor's desk. Sunday at 5 on Wilmington's Big Talker. Thank you. Is that these politicians are now way too comfortable in office and are very interested in doing as little as possible. So, frankly, we're going to have to work hard to get this bill passed in the next few weeks. Otherwise, as I say, although it remains alive next year, the reality is that they're not going to want to do anything about it next year. So what we really want you to do is we really want you to go to our website at grnc.org, and we have some phone calls and emails for you to make. Specifically, we have a copy and paste email we want you to send to all Republicans in the North Carolina Senate to get them to support the bill. We want you to call five senators, okay? Senators Tamara Berenger, Danny Britt, Ron Rabin, Norman Sanderson and Tommy Tucker. Not to say that these people are opposed to the bill, but they have concerns over it, so we need you to express to them your desire to pass this bill in a timely fashion. Again, that's at grnc.org. In closing, I would like to thank the Civitas Conservative Leadership Conference for allowing us to broadcast here. My name is Paul Vallone. You've been listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom. We will be on again next week, and we will bring you up to speed. I hope to be able to tell you at that point that Representative Millis' bill is moving toward the governor's desk. Sunday at 5 on Wilmington's Big Talker. Thank you. To be able to tell you at that point that Representative Millis' bill is moving toward the governor's desk. Sunday at 5 on Wilmington's Big Talker. Thank you. Thank you.